All right, hello, welcome everyone to Star Trek from the Holodeck. This is the Lower Decks edition. I am Michael, your host. Today, we're going to be discussing, David and I will be discussing Season 4, Episode 7, titled A Few Badgeys More.
It's your favorite character back in the limelight.
Yeah, Dave, listen, as soon as I saw that title, I didn't even need to watch the episode. I was like, I'm in. Give me some Badgy.
And dude, I did not realize what they would do with Badgy this episode, but it was awesome. I mean, it was the atypical Star Trek moment. You know, you think of the stuff they did with Badgy, harken back to stuff like Data and lore and all the weird dualities in Star Trek.
Mm-hmm. So the official synopsis: 3 computerized villains return to cause problems for the Cerritos crew. The episode was written by Edgar Moplacer and directed by Bob Suarez. David, this is actually the episode you and I have been waiting for. We have now talked about the return of the AI supervillains for quite some time now. You know, yes, when I say quite some time, they were present during season 3,
yes,
but we knew it was only a matter of time before they returned. Now, we haven't seen all of them in one episode together, sharing an extensive story. Now we've seen a story where they're encompassing both Peanut Hamper, Agamus,
my favorite,
as well as Badgy. Well,
yeah.
Who doesn't love Agamus, especially because the great Jeffrey Combs voices the diabolical AI. Dude, Jeffrey Combs, is he like, I mean, he's Star Trek royalty, right? At this point,
he is, because of how many times he's shown up in Star Trek in different characters, not as all like one character.
Yeah.
He's showed up in Star Trek as multiple characters.
Deep Space Nine, he was what, 3 characters?
I think he was 3.
Yeah,
he was actually 3.
And then he was one of my favorite characters in Enterprise. Yeah, I forgot his name now. Jeez.
Oh my God, I forgot his name too.
Too much Star Trek, and I forget.
Because, well, that's what happens when you see the giant koala in the sky and become one with the universe.
Yeah. So what was your favorite part of the episode?
Oh, my favorite part of the episode by far is probably Badgy. The whole story of Badgy, okay, is this one character who is traumatized because Rutherford is his father and he has daddy issues, essentially. And in the very end, in order to get his way, he has to separate first from his good side. So he makes Goodgy, which I'm happy that Goodgy is still around. Goodgy. And then later on, Logie, he removes Logie and then kills Logie.
If I didn't know better, I would think 5-year-olds was actually writing this. There's no thought process in these names. It's literally like, hey, one of the writers probably has like a kid, like a 4-year-old. I'm like, give me a few names.
Exactly. That's what it is. But it is so cool because like the way that it's done, it's that part of like that Rick and Morty magic where it's like outside you look at this and it's like, just like you said, it looks like it's written by a 5th-year-old.
Yeah. What's a 5th-year-old?
A 5th grader.
There you go.
But then you take a step and you go, wow, there's a lot being said. Let's see. He separates from the good side and the bad side. So you have those two. But in order to truly be evil, he has to throw away logic and embrace his chaotic side. So what does he do? He kills his logic side.
Yeah. That's so great.
I know. And that's the thing. It's a lot of the things I really dig about Lower Decks is the subtle symbolism. I think that's the proper way. That's the proper word to use for like when you give your story, but like there's like little meanings behind everything.
Yeah.
And it's not just, fluff, what I call fluff. It's not,
There's
like
meaning behind it.
meaning behind your actions.
Yeah. And that's the thing that I feel like Mike McMahon took away from his time on Rick and Morty.
Oh, he did.
Because despite Rick and Morty's, childish dick and fart jokes, it's actually a very intelligent show.
Oh, yeah. The one thing I've always said that I've learned from Rick and Morty, you can do dick and fart jokes, right? But then Rick and Morty can actually give you a story of, self-awareness and give a character
Existentialism.
like existentialism and deal with like really heavy themes, like even like suicide,
Human problems.
Like Rick is an asshole by all strength and measure. He is a bad person, but you feel sorry for him when they take that moment to show you, hey, this is what he's going through behind the scenes when he's by himself.
Yeah, I wouldn't say he's a bad person. I'd say he's like morally ambiguous.
He's morally ambiguous, but he's also broken.
Oh yeah,
because come on, like when he's in the garage, and for those people that are probably wondering what we're talking about, Rick and Morty, there's a very iconic scene in Rick and Morty that every Rick and Morty fan talks about that just leaves them gobsmacked. Is the garage scene where Rick is sitting there in the garage, and you realize by the end of it, he's been working on a machine to try to kill himself.
Yeah.
How dark is that?
Yeah.
When you come to the realization, oh my God, this man is just really miserable and broken.
Well, and that's why I say Mike McMahon brought something from or at least learned something. And it could very well be Mike McMahon that brought that skill set to Rick and Morty. Yeah. I don't know. I'm not familiar with Mike McMahon's work prior to Rick and Morty. However, there's so many similarities between the shows, and not just the obvious. It's a cartoon, and they're both silly. There's a lot of dick and fart jokes. There's themes that are governing both Rick and Morty as well as this show. And where Mike McMahon really flexes and shows his Star Trek know-how is taking those Rick and Morty elements, let's call it, and mixing it with what makes Star Trek. And that's what he did in an episode like this. When you have an episode start essentially with this brief flashback to, I believe it was a post-credit scene from the season 3 finale where we see Rutherford's implant seized by the Drukmani salvage vessel. And then you create this entire story of this villain's ascension where he transcends, he is conflicted.
Yes.
It's a very classic textbook Star Trek type of thing. The idea of a being of high intelligence having an internal crisis, and, I guess you can say a form of introspection or internal deliberation, where such a being then engages in critical analysis and is forced to reconcile their intellectual inconsistencies, such as beliefs, purpose, values, and logic. And in the end, he either destroys them or fixes them.
And then in doing so and fixing them, ascends into a higher plane of existence.
Yeah, where the koala resides.
And think about it, like, all of this depth that me and you are talking about, because it's there.
Oh, yeah.
But then you surround it, or you kind of like dress it up with jokes about koalas, jokes about basically very very interesting father-son dynamics.
Yeah.
With Rutherford. You do all those jokes are wrapped with this nice philosophical statement about this character in Badgy.
Well, you have this character, I guess you can call Badgy nihilistic.
Oh, yeah.
He snubs everything that most people wouldn't. He is the complete opposite in a lot of ways of the utopian ideals of the Federation. But through this process of self-discovery, he rises above his own nihilism. yeah, his own nihilism, and transcends to a point where he sees purpose and realizes, why am I doing this?
Exactly.
Because that's what most nihilists and existentialists suffer from, is the idea of a lack of purpose. And typically you try to find your own meaning and values of life so that you can feel like there's a reason for being, essentially. And that's what this episode did in such a beautiful way, dude, with this Badgy character. And this is actually the direction I was hoping they took, because if you look back at all the previous Badgy episodes, it definitely was laying down the breadwork, or I should say the groundwork, for this type of, I guess you can say, ending
for this character. Especially like when you look at the overall theme of this episode was about quote unquote redemption. And and you look at the characters of Agamus, Peanut Hamper, and Badgy, who are three of the most deplorable villains that they've ever introduced, right? But at the end of the day, those characters find their own redemption. Why? Because they went into a soul searching moments, and they have this existential crisis that they come to this understanding of what truly is their purpose.
That's what it's all about. It was about a purpose.
A purpose. Yeah. And like, I was like cracking up at the fact that this whole time, this whole season, I thought the main villain of the entire season 4 would have led to one of these three, because it's AI.
I remember you said that you had thought that mysterious vessel was probably one of these three.
Yes.
And you were on the right track. Obviously it's not now, but they were still connected. They connected the stories together because the myth arc of the season, this unknown alien vessel, is further fleshed out, but this time with the assistance of Agamus.
But the beautiful thing about that too is not only did they do that, but they pushed the narrative forward by giving us a little bit more information on that species. We now know they're not going around destroying things. They're going around and collecting things.
Yeah, they're stealing these vessels and not actually killing them. And that's what I was saying prior to us recording when we were talking about what we're going to discuss for today's discussion. There was a lot of moving parts yet again in a 26-minute episode. So many different parts. Some aspects were a little bit lighter. It's not the best written episode of the season, but man, they really brought together multiple story arcs that they have been working on since day one, and bringing them a certain amount of resolve while using that resolve to push forward the actual myth arc of the season, which is the unknown alien vessel.
Yes.
That is some good fucking writing.
That's not just good writing, Mike. That's good show running.
Yeah.
Because if that's
absolutely.
If that another thing that me and you have talked about in other shows that many of our audiences probably listen to at this point is the fact that we harp that the art of show running is lost. No one seems to understand what show running does, what a showrunner does. You look at all the other franchises, we all have our gripes and complaints of how their shows are going. And it's usually we point to the fact that there's too many cooks in the kitchen. There's not that centralized voice that's the showrunner.
Yeah.
Here in Star Trek, we have showrunners running things. And you can say bad things about like Picard, or people might be out there, some fans might be out there and say, I don't like Discovery. But the thing I will always say is the strength of Star Trek is they stick to their guns because they have a showrunner that has their set, creative mind in place.
Yeah, in my opinion, the problems plaguing other IPs currently, including Star Wars, which is probably the worst right now, Star Trek, this new era of Star Trek no longer has those problems.
No.
Now, I'm not saying everything is perfect. It's not. Nothing's perfect. And they do need to make some adjustments here and there on some of their shows. I would like to see more of the philosophical being brought in, maybe larger issues pertaining to the human condition as opposed to some of the more easy, low-hanging fruit that is usually explored in today's TV shows dealing with identity politics and other things. Like, I don't have a problem with that, but let's expand out a bit.
Yeah.
But other than that, Dave, I really don't have a lot of complaints when it comes to Star Trek anymore.
Yeah.
Or I should say this era of Star Trek any longer.
And I think the biggest bonus, the biggest pro of Star Trek right now is we have some very strong showrunners and executives behind each show.
I think the last season of any Star Trek that has irked me was probably the first season of Picard. That was a season that was written very poorly. There was a lot of good things that they were doing, a lot of cool ideas.
Yeah.
But the story in itself it fell flat.
Because
like I always say, there's a reason why they let that showrunner go.
Yeah, because the showrunner did not have a clear, concise path for his show.
He didn't understand how to showrun.
He didn't understand where, okay, I just can't throw ideas at the wall and hope that they stick.
And you know why he didn't know how to showrun, David? Because he wasn't a television writer ever.
And he was a novelist.
He's a novelist.
But then afterwards, you have Akiva Goldsman come in and suddenly right the ship. And Akiva Goldsman's a good showrunner.
Yeah.
You have
executive producer. Yeah. He is a showrunner, but he isn't the showrunner.
He's not the showrunner.
Yeah.
But you have Terry Matalas. Terry Matalas has done a very good job. Matalas.
Yeah.
And then
imagine if Matalas and Akiva Goldsman were there from day one.
Exactly.
Picard season 1 could have been way better. So bringing it back to Lower Decks, here we are yet again with an expert level writing team tackling Star Trek in some of the best ways you can tackle Star Trek and making it fun at the same time. Now, I'll be the first one to say that, comedy isn't always my go-to. That's why Lower Decks tends to be your favorite thing. Like, you love Lower Decks. Me, I like it because it's Star Trek. I prefer my Star Trek more serious. However, that doesn't mean that this isn't an exceptional show. They're really doing some really good work this season. And, listen, it's pretty consistent, except for a few things here and there during season 3. Those are just minor nitpicks. We're not talking, let me get on YouTube and create a 45-minute video where I'm ranting about how Star Trek is woke and it's a bunch of bullshit. That's just not the case currently.
Yeah. And especially with Lower Decks, because I've always felt the strength of Lower Decks is, yes, it is a quote unquote cartoon based on comedy, but that writing team still is able to give us something that has some depth to it.
It still is the most. I don't like gatekeeping Star Trek, but I think most of us Star Trek fans could probably say that Lower Decks is the most Star Trek currently airing. If that makes sense.
No, you have a good point. Yeah.
When it comes down to textbook Star Trek, it is absolutely doing it the best.
Oh, yeah. Because right behind it, I would say Strange New Worlds.
When it comes to textbook Star Trek?
Textbook Star Trek.
Yeah.
Textbook Star Trek storytelling, I think, Strange New Worlds this past season, that was old school Star Trek storytelling. But when you take the entire franchise as a whole, you look at Lower Decks, that is bar none the how Star Trek is written. Yes, it's more done in the comedic vein.
Yeah.
But it still remains its essence of that, at least giving us that bits of philosophy, giving those bits of humanity that basically is Star Trek.
Isn't that what I said when this show started 4 years ago now? I said, listen, as long as you stay true to what this show is supposed to be, I'll be there. I'll watch the show. And that's something this show has managed to do consistently since day one. Even with the less than stellar episodes, it still is Star Trek. That's very much what Star Trek should be and should always be, in my opinion. So, if this is a clue as to how the season's going to end, I think we're in for there's 3 more episodes left this season.
Yes, after this one, it's basically we only have this whole season's 10, I think.
Yeah, I think we're in for a really good final quarter of the season because each episode, I believe, David, has actually gone up in our RMD score.
Oh yeah,
Because
I
we
believe it
started the
has.
year off with like an 82 or something, and since then it's been on a slow incline.
Yeah, I think our last episode was in the 90s because that was like one of our favorite episodes.
Yeah.
And then like when you get to this one, the thing I really appreciate about it is, I don't know, it's almost like Lower Decks has a way of basically answering the questions that I'm always afraid of as a viewer right now. Like I constantly will say, oh, they're going to go the AI route. They're going to go this route. No, they totally wipe off that board and basically say, no, the AIs have nothing to do with the ship that's the main antagonist. It's something else. So in doing so, they make me want to watch the next episode to say, okay, well, if I'm wrong, yeah, Agamus, Peanut Hamper, and Badgy have nothing to do with the ship that the main antagonist of the season.
Yeah.
So who is? Because, and that's the beautiful thing about Lower Decks, is they keep the strength of this season is like it keeps me wanting and guessing what's going to happen next.
Do you think the reveal will it stick to classic Roddenberry roots and it just be a simple misunderstanding, lack of communication?
I think it's heading towards that.
Or do you think we're going to be introduced to a new villain or an old villain that we haven't seen in a very long time?
The problem is I don't know what old villain you could possibly bring up, because like throughout this season, they've essentially gone through every single episode and wiped out this villain off the board and saying, no,
Yeah,
that's not them.
but you're dealing with almost 60 years of Star Trek. There's so many. There's so many characters.
And that's why I'm like going, you gotta, now we're trying to dig deep and saying, oh, who could it be? Could it be like what you said, like an old villain returning? And I'm like going, I just can't think of any old villain that would come back and essentially go around and collect alien species.
It's got to be a very powerful species.
I mean, I could go with my go-to mic and say it's Q.
Oh my God! Please stop.
It's Q. Every single series, it's down to Q.
No. Okay, so bringing it back to Jeffrey Combs, he has been 9 characters.
Imagine that. That is insanity.
On 4 different Star Trek television shows, most notably Brunt of the FCA on Deep Space Nine.
Yep.
Wei-Yun on Deep Space Nine, and then this is my favorite, Shran on Star Trek Enterprise.
That's what it was. It was Shran.
Dude, Shran is on my top 10 favorite Star Trek characters. Because number one, I didn't even realize we knew nothing about the Andorians until I watched Enterprise years back. I'm like,
yes.
You know what? We don't know anything about these aliens. What a great way to finally expand on their mythos. You know, so he played Shran, just to name those. I think those are his top 3, right? Brunt, Wei-Yun, and Shran.
Yeah. Those were because he's always been this one actor, especially back in the day, that they would just call on to play characters. Because in Star Trek, it's very easy to cover someone up with a ton of makeup and make them into an alien species. But the fact that I always thought Jeffrey Combs, I think to me, only 4 or 5. I didn't realize it was so many, up to 8.
No, 9.
9. Up to 9 characters in Star Trek.
He was in Voyager as well. He played some rando character. And then, of course, Lower Decks. So there's the 4 shows he has been in, but he has played 9 characters.
9 characters in Star Trek. And it's like...
And listen, there are people who would not be able to pick him out because his range, forget the alien prosthetics. Brunt next to Shran and Wei-Yun.
Oh, next to Agamus.
You would be shrugging. You'd be like, wait, what? That's the same guy? Yes, it is.
Yes, it is.
Wei-Yun and Shran, you can probably see the similarities to a degree because they speak a similar cadence. But the way he plays Brunt, there's no way.
No.
There's no way you're going to figure that out unless someone tells you.
But that's the thing that I'm like, I'm looking at pictures right now of like all the characters that he has played. And it's so insane. Like he's gone from playing a regular gangster, a mobster character in TNG.
Yeah.
And then he went
No, it was Deep Space Nine.
Oh, Deep Space Nine?
Yeah.
And then he went from Weiyun, which you look at that first jump and it's like, no way, that's Jeffrey Combs. But then you go to Shran, and then you go to, he even played a Ferengi at one point.
Yeah, it was Brunt.
Oh, yeah, that's Brunt. But there's
You're talking about Krem.
Yes.
From Enterprise, yeah.
And it's like, holy crap. It's so weird that you're right. If you were to actually say, hey, can you pick out Jeffrey Combs? And you probably couldn't because of the fact that the prosthetic makeup is done stellar. But on top of that, you have his range.
He's an amazing talent that's never been given the credit he deserves.
And then you have him doing a voice of Agamus. Agamus is totally different.
Well, you can kind of tell it's him though. It's kind of hard to.
With voices, with voice it's hard to differentiate.
Don't get me wrong. I don't think he's doing a bad job. I'm just saying that when I heard Agamus back in what season,
it's Jeffrey Combs.
I knew it was Jeffrey Combs. Yeah,
but it's like characteristic wise.
Well, dude, he's a box, David, and it's animated.
Come on, the's more to Agamus.
Now you're just blowing him.
There's more to Agamus than he's a box. He's also blue.
I did like that. That part was fucking hilarious.
Oh, dude, that made me laugh so hard.
Yeah.
Look, I'm going to change my color. I'm good now.
What a great episode. They also kind of riffed on the whole grappler thing.
Yes.
They're kind of poking fun, when they said, why do we even need a grappler? I think one of them even said grapplers are dumb.
Yes.
I would have to agree with that. That's one thing that I definitely disliked about Enterprise. I got used to it eventually. They didn't have a tractor beam.
They had a grappler.
And we understand why. The technology wasn't there yet. It's still relatively new in the world of space exploration. Humanity hadn't really mastered all of its technological advancements quite yet.
Mike, Archer was a simple man.
But that grappler was, I'm like, what are you guys, fucking pirates?
No. I always thought the grappler was a hillbilly thing. That was such a hillbilly thing when you look at it.
That makes it worse, David. I don't want to.
That made it funnier because it's Archer. It was stuck with Archer. And I was like going, yeah, Archer's the hillbilly of all captains.
If I was an executive producer on that TV show and they brought me that idea, I'm like, no. How about we just have a first version, like a Gen 1 tractor beam that doesn't always work right?
And then there's that.
How about we do that?
And then there's that one writer who, ooh, I think that will do just nicely.
Wait, what? You talking about Archer's podunk behavior in that first season?
Exactly.
Ooh, lolly, let's do that grappler.
I like that grappler on my ship.
The worst. Yeah, we're getting into other territory here, but listen, this is what Lower Decks does.
It does.
It's a show that relies a lot on callbacks.
And it's okay too. Do you realize
it's okay as long as they also have their own definitive story.
Yeah.
And so far they do.
But think about it, Mike.
Although
Lower
the first
Decks,
episode this season didn't.
The one of the strengths
was a little bit of a struggle bus.
Yeah, that was a struggle bus. But like one of the strengths of Lower Decks is they've been able to do those callbacks that me and you just like rally against in other shows, but they make it work. Why? Because they stick with they still give us a narrative to follow.
Yeah. And as long as the show continues to do that, I will always watch the show. If the show becomes nothing but references and Easter eggs, then I probably would, transport myself right off the ship.
And you want to put yourself in the buffer?
No.
In the transporter buffer?
Nope. But I would shoot a grappler, Mike McMahon. All right, David. So percentage for this episode, RMD score?
I'm going to give this one a 89. I really enjoyed this episode for what it was. And as I said, it's one of those episodes that I was really surprised with because originally I thought that this would have been led to the finale of seeing, the AIs once again being the main antagonist for the Lower Decks crew, because that's an ongoing theme of them going against AI, which I'm okay with.
Yeah. Okay.
Essentially, Mike McMahon says, no, we're going to do something completely different. And that has me really interested what they're going to do in the next 3 episodes.
Yeah. I'm hoping the villain is new. I don't know if it'll have the same effect, though, because we know that this show is built on, a reveal. It is built on that in a lot of ways. So it almost feels like Mike McMahon is almost forced to make it be something or someone that is familiar to Star Trek fans. But we'll see. I'm going to give this episode a 90%. I thought it was a strong episode. It was probably one of my favorite episodes of the season so far. I like the Badgy stuff. I like when people are conflicted internally and you have the splitting of personalities into separate beings. It gets highly philosophical, and I didn't want to get too nerdy into that stuff. I was going to break it down. And I was like, you know what? This is a cartoon. I'm not going to get all crazy.
You don't want to make our audience go, are these guys serious?
Yeah, I don't want to over intellectualize something that doesn't need to be. But it was smart, and I really enjoyed the episode. All right, Dave, this brings us to the end.
All right. Thank you. Live long and prosper.